You know, he's really, he's shameless in intellectual argument. He's absolutely without character, a moral foundation, or even intellectual substance.
I feel very limitless creatively especially with the internet. Like there's no, you don't have to do like a 3-year album cycle or anything like that. And you're an independent artist. So I'm like catering to a very small audience. And most of the people who are with me now are people who have been with me through every transition that I've done. So I feel pretty comfortable, reinterpreting things or doing new genres and without people being like, what is this? It's like, it's kind of, besides the brand change, I think most people know if they encounter me, they know that like they're going to get something different every time.
Yeah. Yes, by the way, this is Erik Harris, who is joining me today. I probably should have introed you before we went into that, but like all very interesting. Erik, formerly Gold Pony, which some of you may have heard of. And yeah, Erik is how would you classify yourself? A musician, artist?
Yeah, I guess I'm a musician. I play
pretty good
a lot
photographer
of
too, actually.
Thank you. I try to. Well, actually, the photos that I have on there are actually taken by a pretty famous Vogue photographer named James Mountford.
Ooh.
Yeah, and it was like a friend of a friend thing, and from pictures from a couple of years ago. So I don't get to take any of the credit for his awesome work.
Yeah.
I just happen to know.
I'm talking about your previous photography that you used to post. Like,
oh, thank you. Yeah. I know. I was really into that film though. Film just became my kryptonite. But thank you. Yeah. I try to be a jack of all trades, I guess, with the art in the art world.
Yeah.
Artist is a cool word, but you don't want to call yourself an artist.
Yeah, because like everyone's like, she's an artist. She's an artist, like
right. If you're an artist, it's determined by other people saying you're an artist.
Exactly. Yeah. It's like calling yourself hot. Like
right. Yeah.
We'll decide if you're hot,
Exactly. We're all going to talk about it. We'll let you know. Yeah, we'll let you know.
Yeah, and as you were just saying before, by the way, we're going to be talking about Alfred Bester's work today, The Stars My Destination specifically. But I just wanted to talk more about Erik's stuff. Like you were saying before, that you have a very, you work across many genres, or you change it up every now and then. And,
sure.
And like, I really got into your stuff, when you were kind of more on the metal side of things.
Pretty heavy. Yeah.
Yeah. But it was also kind of like, I loved what you did with, you kind of brought in some electronic stuff into the metal stuff that you did earlier. But now you're sort of doing your latest is Anorexia, right?
Yeah,
what it's called.
Anorexia,
and it's a sort of electronic album, like pop influenced a little bit, alt pop.
Yeah,
sort of.
I would call it pop. I think it's my version of pop. I think if you heard the heavy stuff and you heard me screaming and playing really chaotic music, and then out of nowhere it's like drum and bass. It's in the same milieu of chaotic influences colliding with each other. So I think there's a little pop, there's a little house, there's some techno in there.
Yeah, I love it. I love it. And like I really kind of vibed with this album too, as well, because electronic music for me is normally I sort of write to electronic music. You're normally like more instrumental stuff. And to me, I always have this association of a kind of, a vibiness to it. And it sort of just kind of washes through me. I don't really kind of, it doesn't give me pause, so to speak. And that's probably a function of the fact that I use it for writing and sort of to getting into the zone and stuff. But, your stuff was like, it has that same kind of vibe, but like, I actually like just wanted to listen to it. Like there was so much texture and layering to it that, it kind of made me kind of wake up and be like, yes. So how the fuck did you do that?
Well, thank you. I think the thing is with techno music, for instance, it's made to get you to it's not fighting for your attention. It wants you to tune out, right? It wants you to just be in your zone. In this case, it was one of those things where I sat down for a long time and I worked thoughtfully for the first time. Normally I work very like instinctually and I'm kind of just like raging out. But this time I sat down and I thought like, well, I want to make something that I think will be hopefully undeniable, or maybe the start of something undeniable. Like this is the first step, to where you're kind of like, well, he sounds a little strange, but then eventually it kind of grows on you and eventually you kind of can't ignore it. So it sounds like it worked with you. And I also think that it was probably the first record that I ever made with anybody or by myself or in any situation where I got really personal. And I thought, like, what I want to do something that is specifically for myself. And so I just leaned really hard into all my influences. I mean, like, I think from the first track, a lot of people said it sounds like, oh, this sounds like Radiohead. This part sounds like Burial. This part sounds like this, or, you know, Massive Attack or whatever. And then you go, yeah, well, that was exactly what I was hoping for, because I really wanted to just be myself unconsciously, or, you know, without being self-conscious. And
that opening track, that was immediately what I thought as well. Like, oh, this is very, very Tom York.
Right.
But then it kind of expands out from that. Like, so you have all those allusions and those references and stuff like that, that just becomes something else. And it's a really good argument for like just wearing your influences on your sleeve, you know, just putting it all in there.
Absolutely. Well, I mean, I think, you know, when I was I worked with labels as a songwriter and I worked in bands, and I always tried super hard to just be really weird and avant-garde, and not because I had something to prove, but just because that's what my taste was. And I wanted I wanted to enforce my taste on other people. So with this record, it was kind of like the opposite. I stopped like trying to jam weird down everyone's throats, and I tried to do what my version of like standards were. And I'm even leaning into that further with a follow-up, you know, like I want it to be like, I don't want to go further and further away from pop music. I want to go further and further towards it. But the pop music that I grew up with, that I loved, you know, Sade. I'm a big Sade fan.
Yeah, she's awesome. Smooth
operator. Yeah, it's like, could you get a better song than that? Or like, This Is No Ordinary Love is maybe one of the best songs ever written.
I remember when like I've worked on a few films before, and like whenever like someone got the boom mic, I'd just be like, boom operator.
Yeah, exactly. No, exactly. It's just, there's those things that like are just so a part. Yeah, it's so applicable, and it's so part of it. It's like everybody knows what you're talking about. Who doesn't want to be like that? And so I just thought like, well, rather than go further and further into the underground, I want to do the opposite and just try to go further and further into the mainstream, because it's just the one thing I haven't done.
And also the underground thing, like I think a lot of people labor on, like, and this is not just musicians, but just artists in general, labor under the assumption of the old days about there being a kind of dynamic underground. Right. Yeah. Like it's all one thing now. Yeah, it's all one thing. But that then I think deconstructs the idea of the mainstream too, right? Like,
sure.
I mean, some things you are very solidly mainstream, but the mainstream relies on this kind of quasi underground, but it's not the same as it used to be, you know? So, but it's
the indie ground.
Yeah.
It's like once people started calling the Strokes indie rock, even though they were like on a major label and the biggest band in the world, everything from that point on was like aestheticized. And so people started thinking differently in terms of like what was like the cool thing to do. Whereas like in the 90s, all of the bands that were big were just cool. They weren't they were all big bands though. Like you listen to Jesus and Mary Chain, or you listen to Nine Inch Nails or somebody like that, and they were the biggest bands in the world. It's just that during that time, people were more open to things being different. Whereas now it's so easy to make anything. We have the technology. I can make any sound with my laptop. So it's not hard to achieve an idea anymore. So things are more branded into their little spaces. But because everybody has also been thrust into the world of non-critical, everything's good attitudes of the 2010s.
Optimism.
Exactly. It was the 2010s where it was like you could no longer say this is bad or this is good. There wasn't really like a sharpening of the taste. There was a broadening of the palate. So then it all became part of like one big slop. And I think that now there's a refinement that's happening that allows us to enjoy that. Whereas before it kind of felt like everything is turning bad. I see it going the other way now. Where it's like, oh, you're a pop artist and you're lean into it and there's no self-consciousness. You are wearing that on your sleeve. That's okay, because now I recognize that like you're Coca-Cola, and when I feel like Coca-Cola, I can have Coca-Cola. I don't have to drink, the weird thing off in the corner to be cool. I can just unabashedly enjoy Coke. I think it's capitalism in a good way.
Yeah. Do you get the sense that as someone who used to play guitar in bands and things like that, do you have a sense of like, lamenting the passing of that era? Because I don't know, unless, correct me if I'm wrong, because you know more than me as a musician, but I just don't think there's going to be another pop or rock person.
Revival.
Yeah, like it's not going to happen.
I don't think so. I used to lament it but that was also me being foolish and believing in the idea of like the real thing
and being a guitar guy.
Yeah, exactly. But once I got over that, I was like, wow, because I play guitar on this record. You just don't recognize it. But I'm playing guitar on at least 3 songs on the record. So, but it's ostensibly an entirely electronic record. Massive Attack was playing guitar on their records, but you would never think of Massive Attack as a rock band. You know what I mean? They're like the first trip hop group. So I don't think there will never be another rock, a sneering, bratty, in your face rock thing. There will just be the underground hardcore and metal and things like that will dominate that space, but there's not going to be like there's not going to be Guns N' Roses Part 2.
Yeah.
I think once rap became hip hop
hegemonic.
Yeah, it became rap became the mainstream, and then it became pop culture. Like entirely. It subsumed everything. So now everything is a flavor of hip hop music now. Yeah. There's just no escaping it.
And those techniques of like, sampling and, improvisation and yeah, that's kind of more common now. Like there is a sense of, I've got this like old man thing about it though, where it's like, there's always this kind of lingering thing about like, oh, you're just doing it on the computer. Where's the skill? Where's the musicianship sort of thing, right? And those people are still out there. But part of the kind of democratization with the tools, I think that's kind of good because it's like people who aren't as skillful can make really great music, if that makes sense, that people respond to and whereas in past eras they probably couldn't because maybe they couldn't shred on the guitar or whatever. So the possibilities I think is part of the appeal, I guess.
I think I agree with that. And also that's kind of the thing that was probably the hardest for me to let go of personally. It was like, you guys you're not technically skilled people. And even down to like everything's digital now. But the funny thing about that is after the hurricane last year, I sold all of my hardware equipment, drum machines and synthesizers. I was doing everything myself. And I decided I was going to lean into audio production entirely in the laptop for the next record. Okay. Because it was the one thing that I never did. like, even the album, even though Anorexia is an electronic album, there's live bass, there's live drums, there's live instruments on a lot of the tracks. I just make it sound electronic. Whereas the next one, I'm like, well, okay, I'm just going to try that. It's the one, it's always doing the thing that you haven't done. And I think also, like, people weren't always that good. Bob Dylan and Lou Reed. I was listening to White Light, White Heat the other day because somebody was like, how do you not like the Velvet Underground? I was like, I just don't enjoy their music. And then I was like, I'm going to listen to it. I'm going to like give it a reappraisal. And I put on the record and I was like, this is not enjoyable. I don't like it. And I just can't pretend to enjoy this music. I'm not saying it's bad. What I'm saying is I don't like it. And like I talked about the Strokes earlier, I don't like the Strokes.
Yeah,
songs.
me neither.
But I love the way that the music sounds. The band is so tight and the recording is so beautiful and pristine, but I don't like the way their songs are. I'm just like, this is just boring music. I don't like it. So that goes to say that, like, taste is still the ultimate factor. It doesn't really matter. If you hear my voice and it makes you screech and it makes you wince, okay, well, it's not for you, but I had another record where I was screaming my head off, and that would be something that in person would be very unpleasant to experience, but for whatever reason, in the context, it was good, so in the right context, everything has its place. I'm very utilitarian when it comes to art. I used to be very hipster, like everything has to be authentic art. And now I'm like, no, it's about utility, because if you can create a moment, that's what poetry is, right? That's what writing is. That's what film is. It's not always the story or what they're telling you. Sometimes it's just the way it makes you feel.
Yeah.
And sometimes you get to choose. I want to feel melancholy. I can put on a melancholy film. I don't have to search through endless things. I can just put on the thing that puts me in that place. So, like I said, I mean, people hate when I say this, but it's the beauty of capitalism. Like, now anybody can make anything, and you don't have to waste your time on just relying on what is widely available.
Yeah.
You
and
can
you don't
search out.
As a creator as well, you don't have to be, like we were saying before, that skilled either. And that's that's part of the, this occurred to me actually, I think yesterday. I was like, the algorithm kept like spitting like really great singers at me on Instagram. And I'm just like, not like your greats like Mariah or Whitney or whatever, just like current people who like can do amazing things with their voices and shit like that. And I'm just like, like I've been like, I'm just not impressed by that anymore, because with the internet, this even goes down to like technical abilities in like vocals and in like musicianship, like playing instruments. It's just like, you can really like stack your skills and like copy other people, mimic things, and like get really good at something really fast. So it's almost like that technical ability isn't as impressive as it used to be. You know what I mean? There's probably 1,000 fucking Whitney Houstons out there, and it's like, okay.
Well, the world, exactly. We expand our reach, the world becomes smaller, and then you discover that actually these special things aren't so special because now we just have access to them. But like, I think that's what makes music. Well, it's the same thing with Bob Dylan. People like Bob Dylan because he sounded like Bob Dylan, and people want to say, oh no, he was a great songwriter. Yeah, who cares?
Yeah,
I don't care about that. I don't care about that. I don't care if you're a great songwriter. Elton John was a great songwriter, but he was unique. He had character. And I much prefer character and uniqueness over being really great at something, because like you said, like there's a million people everybody's great. If you get to know them, if you get the opportunity, every person you meet is great in some way. But what makes you special? What makes you completely unique? Maybe it's your lack of talent, but it's your taste, your ability to combine things. Maybe it's, it's like clothing. Like there's only so many clothing options. Eventually, unless you make your own individual pieces, somebody's gonna have what you have.
Oh yeah.
So nothing is truly unique, right? So it just becomes about how you pair things and how you put it all together.
Becomes
That's how I feel.
curatorial.
Exactly. And I think that that's where everything's going. And I think that's fine.
Yeah.
Because say you want to write a book that is, a space opera, like we're talking about, and then it turns into a horror. Well, you can do that now. If you do it in a way that makes, that piques interest and it makes people enjoy it, then it doesn't really matter how you put it together. What matters is that you did something that nobody else has done, or you attempted to do something that you failed. Failing is another great thing, especially I think with literature. And I think Ernest Hemingway said that, like, how easy it would be to do well what has already been done.
Yeah.
And it's like, yeah, of course, like it would be so easy to just, run the 4-minute mile 1 second faster, but if you could leap through space in the blink of an eye, that would be something truly unique.
That's a really good segue, Eric.
You like that?
Yeah, I like that.
Uh-huh.
That's good.
Just came to me. Boom. Right there.
Okay, so so we're speaking of, like, remixing and, like, the pyrotechnics of collage and illusion and stuff.
Sure.
Yeah, we're talking about Alfred Bester, and particularly his novel, The Stars, My Destination, also known as Tiger Tiger. Which title do you prefer, by the way?
I actually liked Hell Is My Destination, the working title.
Oh yeah, that was cool too. Yeah,
because it reminded me of Event Horizon, and I was like, "That's scary." Hell in space scares the hell out of me.
That is scary.
I would have also called this book "The Count of Monte Cristo Part 2."
The Count of Monte Cristo in space.
In space, exactly. In space. Reading it this time, that was very apparent to me this time. The first time around, I was very young. And then this time I was like, oh, wow, he leaned into that one.
He really
Talk about leaning into your influences. Yeah.
Speaking of Bester, so we've been planning this for probably literal years, actually.
It's probably been a year.
Because I remember I floated this with you, like, back when you were still Gold Pony.
Still Gold Pony. Still on Twitter every single day.
Yeah. And you're not on Twitter anymore?
I'm not on Twitter. I started the second one to, like, because my other one got nuked. So I started a new one, and I immediately got frozen out. And I was like, you know what? I'm done. I'm done.
This shit sucks.
How many social medias do I need? I'm almost 40 years old. Like, let me be.
Yeah.
Let me grow alone in peace.
So what got you into Bester?
Yes. Actually, so there was a local used bookstore in the town that I lived at in Northern California when I was a kid, and my dad was really big into sci-fi, and he sort of, like, forced it on me. But I wanted to find my own sci-fi, and I wanted to find something that he had never recommended to me. And at the used bookstore, they had, like, it's all the used books. And then they would have, like, a special book that was, like, wrapped in plastic, and it was, like, a second or first edition. And so I saw The Demolished Man, and it was a first edition book, but it was, like, wrapped in plastic, and it was a thing, but it was like $12. Whoa. And so I saved up my money, and I was like, this is just cool, just based on the package alone. I'd never heard of it. And I just wanted to get the first edition. I don't know why. I was young. I think I was like 13, and I was looking at, like, William Burroughs, Philip K. Dick, like, just whatever sci-fi section, and that was the thing that just really stood out to me because it was wrapped in plastic. It felt like it was special, so I was like, well, that's the one I want. And so I read The Demolished Man, and it made like a tremendous impact on me. Like, I don't know. There are very few books. I think The Fountainhead and, like, The Demolished Man, 1984, like, anything that deals with, like, dystopian paranoia and, like, trying to beat the odds and be an individual, that's, like, a big theme in my life. So that book really, I mean, it's literally about a man trying to commit murder in, a police state, in the ultimate police state. And it was like, that was so crazy to me not only looking back on it now, it's even crazier that it was written when it was written, because it's so reactionary, which is like tiresome at this point in our culture. But the thing that we're experiencing now, they were experiencing in a much different way with the Cold War. And, with the advent of the alphabet groups and things like that in America, even though I know Bester is he's not a statesman, but like he still has a very American feeling to him.
Yeah. And he did this, like Demolished Man is great as well. I could probably do an whole other episode on that. We could probably do a companion episode or something. But
oh yeah, of course.
And this one, and to a lesser extent, although it's still there in The Stars My Destination, the telepathy stuff. Like telepathy was this big thing in the 50s and 60s. I think because they were starting to sort of investigate parapsychology and ESP and all that sort of shit, because they were trying to prove that it was
psychedelic.
Real. Yeah. But it's interesting how like there was this big boom in like stories about psychics and stuff during the kind of under the threat of like nuclear war. You'd think like all science fiction would be about nuclear war and shit like that, although there was a lot of it, but then there was this underlying current of telepathy, which I found really interesting. And it kind of goes to the idea that you're talking about, the police state, propaganda, people being kind of their thoughts being kind of exposed to the world. And
that paranoia of being found out. I think that also speaks to the fact that a lot of sci-fi writers and artists and people at the time were also communists. So they were all very scared of being found out, because even though what they were doing was, just like you were saying before about, you're not really doing anything too bad on Twitter if you can say it on Twitter. If you can say it, like how much risk are you really running? It's like the people throwing paint on the paintings that have glass around them.
Yeah.
It's very performative. There's not any risk there, because if you destroyed a Van Gogh, you would go to jail forever. You'd be sued into oblivion. So there was this performative fear of being McCarthy'd back then. So that's where the paranoia and the subversion of like, and then on the flip side, all the reactionary sci-fi writers and people who were, afraid of being infiltrated.
That's the thing as well. Like Bester was definitely not a communist.
No,
because he has that Randian kind of like, self-made man kind of
the ultimate individual.
The
ultimate individual. But just real quick, what you said though about the psychics, the telepaths, that was also part of Philip K. Dick does it too. Of the nuclear fear, is that the telepathy thing is often an offshoot of the nuclear fallout. Like these people have mutated because the nuclear radiation of World War III, created the right circumstances by which freaks would arrive.
That's even in like X-Men, like the original X-Men, like in the 60s, it was like the subtitle of it was Children of the Atom. So the idea was that somehow, nuclear radiation or whatever has activated the X gene, and that's why mutants arrive, It
was Bruce Banner, the Hulk. He was, he was blasted with gamma rays. Right? He was a scientist who was trying to like crack the code, and then he was turned into a monster or whatever, and it revealed like the inner manhood or whatever. But it was actually like, the freak of radiation, all that. So so Bester really, with this book though, he like basically set the pace for all science fiction for the next 40 years.
Oh yeah, totally. Just out of interest, actually, speaking of science fiction, what was your dad's science fiction, and what? So you said that you wanted to get something that wasn't like what he read. What was your dad reading?
I mean, he really was into Philip K. Dick. That was like his thing, and Kurt Vonnegut and things like that, who I guess would be maybe lesser science fiction, but still sort of, my dad was like a very 90s liberal pot smoking, George Carlin loving, everything is like about like the idea of experimenting with the mind and, being open to the world. And I always thought that was very cool, that he was into all of that. It made me, because my mom was so Catholic and so, conservative and scared of the world. So I loved that my dad was just like this wild sort of hippie.
Okay.
But when you're young, you're like, well, I'm also my own person. I don't want to just be, but I like sci-fi. So I didn't really escape the genre, not until later on. But even then I got really into like beatnik stuff, which is still in the same spirit, I think, of like freewheeling, radicalism or whatever. And not to only talk in the language of the current culture, but these things are referential.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. He loved that but he also liked stuff like Forever War.
Yeah.
He also liked that kind of stuff. But even that is sort of like a hippie's take on the military state.
Okay, interesting. Because I was just like I was thinking, because you were like, oh, I got Bester because it was a book that my dad didn't have. I was thinking your dad was more of the traditional golden age science fiction. So
no,
it's more that he just didn't have Bester around.
He never read Bester. So when I read Bester, then I told him about it. He was like, what the hell? Like, how could you find a thing? And then so I read The Demolishment. Then he read The Star Is My Destination. He like one-upped me. And then he was like, you got to read this book, And I think at the time that book didn't hit as hard for me. I think this is the third time I read it for this. And the first time it was like, I read it and I was like, yeah, that's cool. But like The Demolished Man,
yeah.
I also really like the 50s. I also really like the 40s and the 50s, that era of culture. I think I was always really interested by it. I liked the idea of being like debonair and having an ascot and smoking a cigarette and drinking a martini and being like, highfalutin and, just those like powerful magnates, those ideas of, which is silly to me now, but at the time I really liked the idea of like who's that guy? Howard Hughes. The idea of like I don't know, like a tycoon.
Yeah.
I always thought that was really cool when I was growing up, because I grew up in small towns. I was like, a bumpkin. So I always thought like the idea of being like a big city, dude who like has a Rolls Royce and is really suave though, like a James Bond type.
Yeah. Cool.
At the same time. So.
That era as well, like not even just magnates, like people actually dressed up to go out. Like
right.
even just to go shopping. Like,
yeah,
really
I like
cool
that
as well. I like that too. I mean, I don't do that, but
see, I do. I mean,
I dress up to go shopping.
I don't wear a suit to the grocery store, but I will. Do you know what I mean? I try to be. Yeah, I mean, I could. Like, I always try to be stylish. I'm very like, even when I go to church, they're like, "You're so stylish," and I'm like, "Oh, really?"
I always like at church.
Yeah, I always want to be suited and booted everywhere I go.
Yeah.
Just because, like, yeah, exactly. Everywhere I go, I want to be suited and booted because I don't know. Like I said, just growing up, I grew up in blue collar places, so nobody ever dressed up. Everybody was wearing jeans and jean jackets.
Do you know about the gay term boots?
No. Oh, I mean,
when something is boots, you say boots.
Right, boots, yeah, like, boots the how down, yeah.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah, suited and boots.
It's really good.
Suited and boots, yeah.
Suited and boots.
Suits and boots. Yeah. That's the thing, though, is like when you grow up in like, like blue collar place like Detroit, it's like everybody's wearing a Canadian tuxedo. It's all denim on denim on denim, and people are very slovenly and they're just sort of, they're lowbrow. And I just was like, I'm always going to look good. I always want to look stylish. I didn't even care about being dressed up. It's about being dressed correct.
Yeah, on point. Another gay term, snatched. There you go. That's
So here's the thing. I was a hairdresser for 5 years in Beverly Hills. Yeah. So
So all the gay lingo.
I feel like the gay culture rubbed off on me. At least the attitude rubbed off on me of being like, just kind of having like my nose turned up,
Oh, that's amazing.
There was like, that was what I got, like the gay, because I worked a lot of fashion shows. A lot of my friends were gay. A lot of my coworkers were gay. So it was like, there was an attitude, you know, and I liked the attitude because I was like, yeah, like we're better than other people, which is like not true, you know what I mean? But
Yeah.
we thought we were, and there was like kind of like a,
It's fun
you
to
know,
go through the world thinking that, you know, like, and, you know,
yeah, I wish I still felt that way. I wish you
Um,
know, you get humbled enough afterwards and you go, ooh,
yeah. Um, I first came to Bester when I actually came to, so my parents didn't read that much. My mum read a little bit, and she always encouraged me to read. But in terms of science fiction, like I got into books of science fiction mostly through television programs. Like I was really into like Star Trek and Babylon
sure.
5. And Babylon 5
great.
is how I got into Bester, because there is a character named after him, who is actually played by one of the guys from Star Trek. So there's lots of different kind of crossovers there. So, and that character was like this evil, like, head of the Psi Corps, which is like these psychic cops.
Right, of
and
course,
so he's named after Bester because Demolished Man, obviously. So that kind of led me to the Demolished Man. I read Demolished Man first as well. And I was just sort of blown away by how clever it was in particular. But then I read The Star's My Destination and blown away again, also by the cleverness, but also by how gripping it was to read and the language itself. So there's a kind of literary pyrotechnics on display, and like how he mixed high and low registers of like speech and language and shit, and all the allusions he made to other science fiction stories and tropes, and also, like we were saying before, the classics as well, like Count of Monte Cristo for one, but also things like Joyce and you know, other people like that, Blake as well.
Sure.
So yeah, his work I just find, and then I kind of got obsessed and like started reading all these old short stories and stuff like that. And his work is, again, it's so richly textured, never collapses under the weight of its references though, because he's like, there's lots of decorative, fun, like language stuff, but it's always well paced, and I think that's a function, especially in Star's My Destination, of his sort of period when he worked in radio and television, which was very pacey. Like, so
that makes a lot of sense.
So like, it's The Star's My Destination is like, it's chock full of ideas and like really interesting use of language, but it's paced so well. Like the first time I read Star's My Destination, I did it basically in 2 sittings, like, because I read it one day until like I basically got tired and I had to go to sleep, and then I finished it the next morning, because it's just
that's what I did this time.
Yeah,
that's what I did this time. The first couple times I took my time. This time I was really wrapped up in it. Like I was really, you know, I read the first part yesterday and I read the second part today, because I was just enthralled.
Yeah, it's just so readable. Like it's so the story is probably should go over the story. I did want to talk a little bit about Bester before you go over the story, but
yeah, sure.
Because his bio is really interesting. He kind of started in science fiction and then went off for years, like decades, and then came back to it, which is an interesting kind of trajectory. Like, so he wrote a couple of short stories and then his novels in the 50s, and then went off and became a radio and television writer and also a magazine editor for like for a good chunk of time, and then like came back, I think, in the 70s or 80s and did his later work, which I find very interesting. And it's probably why he also wrote comics. He wrote Superman and the Green Lantern. And,
I did not know that.
And he was the one who came up with the Green Lantern's oath. You know,
I knew that.
In what is it, Darkest Day or something like that.
Yeah, I actually knew that, but I thought that it was like a guest sort of blurb, or like he was asked. I didn't realize that he was actually in the comic world.
Yeah, no, he was writing. I think he was writing mostly for DC. I think a couple of others, but yeah, and Superman and Green Lantern, if I recall correctly.
Well, I know he didn't write a book after The Star's My Destination for like 19 years, right?
Yeah,
like he took like a 20-year almost hiatus.
Yeah.
So is that when he did all?
Yeah, I think that's when he did that, and I think as well that part of his reason for not, I don't know, I'm not going to psychologize him.
Speculate,
but I think part of it is that he's always had a very adversarial relationship with the whole science fiction scene, because the Demolished Man won the first ever Hugo in 1953.
Right, they like created it for that book.
Yeah. But then he had
that good,
yeah, he had he got a bit of a reputation for being, I don't know, a bit of a cunt because he was like an insider outsider in that he critiqued science fiction at the time, because this is with the golden age. This is like when, you know, up until about the early 50s was when science fiction was like, you know, your heroic scientist heroes and that's
sure. Yeah.
I said heroes twice, but you know what I mean? Like, so
no, is that heroism, that super, like we were talking about before, like that Randian sort of like the man who rises above all things.
Yes.
And then the freak accident of his genius leads him towards even greater things than he could have imagined. Oh, what is our potential as men ourselves? Like that was very much like we could be giants. You know what I mean? It was like pre-space.
Yeah.
Right around that time where it was like, we're going to go and we're going to conquer. We're going to, you know, we're going to frontier into space, into the mind, into the next beyond.
Well, that's the thing as well. Like it was more about, it was externalized more. And I think what Bester's innovation, I think, is the focus on the inner space, even though like, The Star's My Destination is basically a space opera. We go to multiple planets and space and shit like that. It is it is about a man's kind of internal journey, I guess, emotional, mental development.
Huge growth, yeah.
But it's really interesting because I think he had a reputation of being a bit of a tourist in the genre because he had spent that time kind of, you know, doing other things and then came back to it. But he also had this very critical relationship with science fiction in that he critiqued it for being kind of in a state of arrested development, in the sense that golden age of science fiction where it was all about, you know, science conquering all, had a sort of coldness to it that he didn't really appreciate. And he also found it, even though it had pretensions to a kind of scientific view of the world, he found it kind of immature. He found it intellectually. He wrote an essay like outlining this, which is actually really prickly and really fun to read. Intellectually, emotionally, and what was the last one? Technically immature.
Wow. He was coming for him.
Yeah, he was dropping those truth bombs. So basically he was saying that intellectually it was immature because it kind of favored fads over like more intellectual fads rather than like properly individualized philosophy, like a limited range of ideas. Emotionally it was immature because science became the hero or the villain. It was kind of worshipped in a way, which we'll get to, which he talks about in Star's My Destination.
Yeah, sure.
And also, instead of emotionally complex characters being the focus point of these stories. And technically, he said that, you know, science fiction is basically you can do anything. There's limitless possibilities, but there was not much stylistic innovation, which he had a problem with. And these are all very fair critiques.
Of course. I mean, I feel like if you are limitless, it's sad to see you waste limitless potential on just doing a trope or following a trend. Or, I I mean, even like somebody like Robert Sheckley, who was writing during, I think, around his same time doing sci-fi, his stuff was all absurdist. And, you know, the only thing that really made it science was that the most bizarre things were happening in space rather than in some sort of magical realm of Earth. But otherwise, it wasn't really, it was just, you know, it just seemed like it was, I don't know, influenced by drugs or influenced by maybe an attitude that is very outdated now.
Yeah.
Which is fine because it's also very fun to see what the world was like during that time, to parse out like, oh, this is what you guys were talking like, and this is what your attitudes were, and this is what was cool. This was the thing, you know. But that's really funny that he was just so viciously attacking the genre. And then he wrote two fantastic I mean, like, two of the best sci-fi books ever written that I've read.
And especially Demolished Man, but also especially The Star's My Destination.
Yeah, more as far, yeah.
All of the kind of cool developments and innovations in the science fiction genre that happened in the second half of the 20th century, so towards the end of it, are pretty much all prefigured in The Star's My Destination. Like, he
lays it out.
He really does. Like, but you've got like the kind of attitude and mentality of the new wave stuff, like, you know, your Harlan Ellison and stuff like that in the 60s and 70s. You got the space opera revival that happened in the 70s and 80s, and definitely this is like very influential on cyberpunk. I think it's William Gibson's, like,
that's what I was gonna say. Yeah, template. Neuromancer. Like, it's basically Neuromancer, and I'd say Radix by Antanasio, and Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep by Dick. Those three books, when I was reading this, I was like, wow, it's like they just read this book and then they each one went off in their own direction of where that book should have gone. But it's, I mean, everything, the technology, the drugs, the interfacing with computers, the idea of like micro cultures, you know, like they really, like, he lays it all out, and it's incredible, actually. It's incredible because
sorry, keep going.
No, I was just gonna say it's just incredible that, like, revisiting this, because I was like, wow, I just didn't realize that he was the genesis of science fiction from that point on. I mean, really, as far as major books that really made impacts, you can trace them all back to that.
Definitely. And I really like the you can see the reaction, I guess, if you want to call him reactionary. I don't quite think that.
I don't think he is particular,
but in terms of his work, in that, like I said, prefigures the new wave that happened in the 60s and 70s with this idea. And the key thing about the new wave, I think, is the idea that the future's not necessarily going to be like this scientific utopia, you know, like that.
Right. No, yeah, it's not going to all work out.
We could regress, which is something that he investigates in The Star's My Destination, in the sense that, like, women's rights have, like, been wound back because jaunting exists, so people can teleport and whisk them away and rape them and things like that. So it kind of reverts back to a more Victorian sexual mores, you know.
Which is funny because it seems like he's very liberal.
Yeah.
But the liberalism of the 50s was still that individualism where it's like, hey, I'm going to become a hyper-capitalist so I can philander and do drugs and party and be wild, not to necessarily disperse my goods to all the poor, but more to, like, wield my own potential. It was like a weird Randian sort of liberalism of, like, hedonism, and then so it's like, well, we have to keep the women locked up to protect them because these ruffians can just jaunt in and take them. But really, now it's also a good way to keep them as pets or concubines or whatever, or what have you. So it is funny to see, because it's like, well, he's reacting to those who are reacting. And I wonder how much of that was like with I don't know if it was around the same time, but when birth control started to really become, disseminated into the populace. I don't know if, I could be projecting that onto that, but I feel like it's around the same time that like now women suddenly have biological freedom.
Yeah,
but what does that mean? Anybody can get them now because they're not protected.
Yeah. Yes.
You know what I mean?
And there's not a cost to
right, exactly.
Yeah,
right. There's no consequence here.
Yeah. But it's not like that, because it predates it, obviously, but there's not that kind of free love idea either. That it's weird because it is that sort of like hyper individualism. But also I think a lot of people misread this as well. Like the amount, like when in the preparation for this, and, sometimes for other episodes as well, I'll go and listen to normie podcasts and like see what they say. And it's always either really kind of quaint or really, really infuriating. Like there's this whole genre of interpretations of this book as like super sexist because of the social, like because of the world that he sets up. And it's like, he's not making this world his perfect utopia of like free love, hippie, right? We can fuck all we want. He's not saying
this is a dangerous place. Where bad
this is not a great thing.
I also didn't feel like, I don't see that. I did never really interpret it that way because all the women seem like they're fully developed and equal partners. There's people who are victims, but it's not because they're women. You know what I mean? They're victimized in a way that is specific to women, but it's not like Jizz, the femme fatale Jizz. She's not a victim by any means. You know what I mean? She's a jailbreaker and she's deceitful. She has her own agency. She sleeps with who she wants to sleep with. How is she? She's a victim of the circumstances she sets herself up for. But so what, aren't we all? Like, what makes a man different than a woman if they are just like dying by their own hand?
Yeah. I think I think part of the sexism thing is that people, because Gully Foyle, who is the main character and a very bad man at the start, at least at the start of it, and probably at the beginning of it, like he rapes women. So it's like, I guess that like sets the stage for people to interpret like really kind of focus in on the female characters and like, like, because there's rape in this book, therefore it's sexist. So
it feels different in the book because that his arc is so broad and it's so vast that he literally, like, he has a transformation like most men never will. From brute and almost like just like the most guttural creature to becoming a Superman, and a literal Superman. So you're like, well, yeah, of course he was a rapist and a murderer and every bad thing you can think of, and then he becomes the complete opposite. He becomes the liberator of all people, and mankind itself, actually.
Yeah. Although there's not. The book, we're skipping it to the end, but the book does leave that ambiguous, I think, whether like, will this like new ability that he's discovered, and will that usher in a golden age, or will it be complete chaos? But I mean,
edit out what I just said, edit that part out. We'll just go through the story.
No, I like that. But we do it jumbled all the time. It's fine. So basically the premise of the story is that Gully Foyle is like just your everyman, kind of like a working schmo in space. And there's an accident and he gets stranded in the ship that he's on called the Nomad. And we meet him and he's basically surviving in a little cupboard in the spaceship. And like he has to like, he's holding on for dear life and has like been living on rations and like spare oxygen tanks for like 170 days or something. And is just sort of, it's really interesting at the start how passive he is about his situation. And just goes about his business to trying to survive. And then a ship comes along, another spaceship, and he sends out a distress signal. They come, but then they don't pick him up. They avoid him. And he basically is, by this event, is shaken out of his passivity and decides to wreak havoc and vengeance on the people who failed to pick him up to rescue him. And that sort of sets off the plot, which, as you said before, is basically directly lifted from The Count of Monte Cristo. Like he goes through a series, he's in prison, goes through a series of capers, gradually refines himself so he can hide amongst the society people who he wants to get revenge on. But then it goes beyond The Count of Monte Cristo and he becomes this sort of Übermensch by the end of the story. And a key thing to remember about this as well is that in this world, people can jaunt, which is like instantly teleport from one place to the other by the power of their mind alone. And, but there are kind of rules which are kind of arbitrary, but I like that because I think he's kind of like making fun of like a lot of science fictional tropes, you know, by making it kind of absurd. Like people can't actually jaunt more than 1,000 kilometers or miles. I can't remember which one.
There's a distance. There's a limitation.
Yeah. And they have to have been to the place or have like seen photos of it and been able to imagine it to sort of jump there. But yeah, so that sets off the whole revenge plot, but like, and obviously a revenge plot is always good because you've got capers and heists and like stakeouts and shit like that, disguises. And so that's why what I was saying before, it's paced really well and extremely readable and exciting. But then it kind of goes beyond that towards the end in the like fourth sort of part of it and becomes this sort of spiritual meditation on becoming and all that, like
the transcendence.
The transcendence. He eventually learns. Well, first of all, he learns. It's discovered that he has learned how to jaunt through space, which is another limitation that they put on it at the start, that no one can actually do that. And
yeah, that's right in the prologue.
Yeah, and then
they immediately state that about 50 times in the first couple pages.
Yeah, and then he, by the end of it, he learns how to jaunt through space and time. So it becomes basically like this kind of god in a way, or so there's much more to it to that's just sort of broad brushstrokes. But yeah, what were your thoughts reading this through this time, actually?
The thing that I thought about more this time than anything was the impact on jaunting and the idea that jaunting basically upended society and really the whole world, because suddenly everybody had the freedom to go everywhere, and it, you know, destroyed the function of the world. And just like all genre stories, or, you know, whatever the central theme is, usually there's always that thing where it's like, you know, jaunting is the thing, right? That's really what the book's about, right? It's the idea of complete and total freedom, and how complete and total freedom destroys society because people are no longer functioning. And so you have to kind of put together this idea, especially throughout the book. It also reflected in Gully's growth. And ultimately, like you said, his sort of transcendence. There's this idea that, like, you have to break out entirely and be completely yourself, be a total individual to be free and to find yourself. But once you do, you have to find your place in society, because it's your job to sort of help. And if you don't, if you just, you know, indulge in complete selfishness, well, then things fall apart because you leave people behind. So I think it also has, like, maybe part of that, like, sort of 50s, like, pre-liberation mindset of, like, we're all gonna go step into the future together. But some people are stepping a little bit faster and ahead of everybody else. And there's some people who feel like there's a moral duty to walk a little slower to bring the other people up with them from the rear. So that was a big thing for me this time.
That's interesting you say that too, because that same Normie podcast that I talked about, we're trying to say that like Bester is basically endorsing Nietzschean Übermenschen, and I'm just like, that is completely off the mark.
No, that's so backwards. It's the opposite.
It's the opposite. It's like the idea that like total freedom is this goal to aim for. It's like, well, Gullyfoyle gets total freedom, and also the whole point of his story is that he begins as someone, like I said, who's very passive in their situation and is accepting their lot in life. And then when he gets motivation, it's really hateful motivation, and it's really kind of like that does like help him develop, but as come into his own in terms of becoming. But it's also like, in order for him to transcend that, he basically has to realize that total freedom is like, you have to be free from your own passions,
right?
You can't be ruled by these, base instincts. Oh, I'm just going to rape someone. Oh, I'm just going to
you can't be a slave to, you can't be a slave to your weaknesses or to your lower self.
And then these same people, and I've read this in other reviews too, so I'm not just picking on this like retarded podcast, but the idea that this book is anti-religion, I'm like, no. The idea that there are stellar Christians, like people who are,
right,
because religion is dirty in this future world. Like, it's like, oh, they're religious. It's like, no, that's satire, mate. Like,
that's what I say. That's so funny that you say that, because I think it just depends on how you see the world, because I just see it. Yeah, no. Oh my gosh, that's insane. Because he becomes great, and then he immediately goes, I can do it. We should help them do it. The whole point is you need to transcend your lower self so you can teach others. And if that is not probably one of the most Christian messages I can think of. I mean, that's literally Jesus being like, you have to become like me, and then you have to teach everybody else to do the same thing. But then not even to get into like the religious aspect of it, but it's like when people say, they say, Jesus used to hang out with prostitutes and thieves and beggars, and they use that as a way to be like, prostitution, theft, and beggary are all good things.
Yeah.
No. He delivered them from those things. He showed that who you are and what you've done is not it's not a stain on your future. And that we all come from various walks of life. There's not a right way to be as a human being, because we're all fallen in our nature, but we can transcend that and become better and help others become better. It's like the most ultimate Christian message. And that's exactly what happens in the book. I think that's the way that you parse out, or the way that you synthesize the Nietzschean Übermensch sort of, will to power with Christianity, is the idea that you, the individual, have agency to grow and to transcend your lot in life, right? You can take that lower form and turn it into something higher, but then instead of just becoming like Caligula, you have to, give up the power, go back, and then elevate and free the rest of the slaves. It's like the most spiritual, and it's spiritual materiality. It's literally like it's the synthesis of both things.
Yeah.
It's actually the most utopian thing you can think of.
Yeah.
It's like, we need to be better so we can help others be better.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what I get from it. That's crazy that they would. I feel like yelling at them now.
And yes, me too. When I was listening to this shit, because like the keystone for this, I think as well, is the scientific people.
Okay.
Like,
the scientific people are backwards.
Yeah. They're the people who save Gullyfoyle when he's I think they live on an asteroid or a small moon or something
Yeah,
like
they're
that.
like abandoned.
Yeah, and they take him in, and like the idea here was that this society sprung up from like a research station of scientists, and over the successive generations, they've been very isolated and basically worship science or their warped view of what science is. Like,
Right.
And so they're the ones who give Gullyfoyle the face tattoo, which he later removes. And it's kind of like, and so, but their culture is really interesting because I think what Bester's doing there is basically have you ever heard that Chesterton quote about like, if you don't believe in God, you'll believe in anything?
Yeah.
like, so it's like, I think that plays out because the scientific people are like, oh, we were brought here by science. Therefore, science is our religion. And they worship all of these like stupid concepts. Like, they worship evolution as if it's like this, a god or whatever. And so, but they don't really believe in a God per se, right? Like they believe in science.
Right.
And so he's totally making fun of that like material and it's really obvious too. Like this isn't like, he's not being subtle.
No,
here.
it's not. He's ham-fisted about the whole thing. It's like they have like a broken language and they're like almost like inbred and they're like, you know, this would be very scientific if we did this. Like everything's like it's like Cro-Magnon man or something. It's like, wouldn't that be very scientific? And you're like, why would you tattoo somebody's face? Oh, because it has much science, you know? And you're like, but it's also funny that like, that reminds me once again, I drew a lot of parallels between this and the Fountainhead, mostly because I think that what was happening in the 40s and 50s is much like what's happening to us today with the polarization. And I felt like this when I was reading the Fountainhead more recently in 2020. I was like, wow, this is so funny because, you know, Ellsworth Toohey is like the ultimate, like, water it all down, make it all shitty, make everything like Netflix. You know what I mean? Like, let's just ruin
Sludge.
beauty. Yeah. It's just, just eat your slop. Like, you know, just get in the trough, pig. And now we're all equal and I'm the ruler of the idiots, you know? And that's how this felt like to me. Like the science people felt like, well, the people now who believe the science, you know, it's like, hey, listen, I love science. I love technology. I love the advances. I would never want to live in another time in history. This is the best time to live in because of science. But let's not start pretending that the robot's going to get up on the mount and start preaching a sermon that's going to liberate mankind. Like, this is all for convenience and pleasure. Like, this is the joy of capitalism, you idiot. Like, what are you talking about? This is just more people trying to make money. You can't turn it into a religion because, like you said, you know, if you don't believe in God, you believe in anything. And then you become stuck on a rock with your face tattooed, you know, worshiping a microwave.
And press ganged into a arranged marriage.
Exactly.
Which he actually returns to, actually, by the end of the book. That's where Gullyfoyle goes after he has, like, you know, space jaunted to see, you know, the stars of Rigel and Aldebaran, is that how you say it? And all those. He goes back to the scientific people.
Well, I thought that was funny because that was like very Eastern, like sort of like once you transcend, like you become like simple. And almost like he was ready to, I took that two ways. Like he went back to like the people who needed to be liberated the most.
Yes.
Like the science people. And he went back to like give them grace essentially, which is very godlike of him. But also I saw it as like, maybe once you transcend, you become like the fool because you no longer are like, you know, burdened by like the shackles of intellectualism.
Yeah.
So there's kind of like that Buddhist bent to it, you know, like why did the Bodhisattva cross the sea? Who cares? You know what I mean? Like, who cares? Like, you know what I mean? That's the whole thing about, right? The trope of enlightenment is that once you know, it doesn't matter if you know.
And
or,
sorry,
you know, no, I was going to say, or did he transcend and come back to free the slaves?
I think whichever option you go with there, it's really, I do not see how you can't see that this is not an endorsement of like materialist kind of kind of Ubermensch kind of crap. It's like,
No.
it's religious. Like there's a religious
Yeah.
message here, and it's not, and it is actually, it's pretty Christian inflected. So I wouldn't say it's a Christian book, but like,
No.
it has all the trappings, some trappings of it. But like you said, the Buddhist stuff as well. And so the idea that he's anti-religion because,
because he makes fun of the Christians.
Yeah.
For some parts, some of the characters do.
Well, yeah, some of the characters do but I don't think he's framing this in a way that like, oh, religion is underground now. That's a dystopic thing to him. I don't view that as like this is the way it should be. Like nothing in this book, the way that society is organized is what I think Bester thinks the way things should be, right? Like he's not saying that at all.
No, I mean, everything you're saying about this podcast sounds almost like they're trying to like be willfully ignorant towards what was going on in the book. And they're really trying to project their modern attitudes onto. It's like, if I wrote a book, do I have to speak? Does every single thing have to be me speaking? Don't the characters have their own thoughts? Was it possible that he was intelligent enough to write characters that he didn't agree with?
I don't know, Eric. Is it possible?
It's insane. It's insane because here's the thing. That sounds so stupid to you, right? But to them, it's probably like they can't think of a world in which the characters could be well written and attractive, but also not exactly how he felt about life. You're like, well, then who's the villain? You know what I mean? There has to be a villain in the circumstances, right? It's a complicated story. The people are complicated characters. The villain has to be the person he disagrees with. No.
Yeah, but that's you have views of that's a view of a novel like an essay, like as if like here's the position that you must. Do you endorse or do you not endorse? And this is a function of like and this is interesting as well because I was going to say this when you brought up the period being very similar to when The Fountainhead was written as well, and to now, in the sense that that's what this is a social media thing, but I think it's bleeding into real life where something happens and you're always invited to like, do you endorse this or do you disagree with it? And I'm like,
how do you feel about this thing? You have to speak your voice.
Yeah. It's like, no, I don't.
No, I don't. Also, is it possible for me to feel two ways about it?
Yes. Or some other weird way. Take some like,
some new route. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think the thing that was really cool about like the 50s and the 60s with sci-fi though was that you could have a liberal view and a Christian view and they could be held together. You could look and say technology will send us to places that no man could ever go. Technology and science will free us from the limits of humanity. And maybe this is what God wants us to do, is to see our potential. Whereas now it's man's potential as an individual, as a being created by God, is completely limited by two sides saying, no, God wants us to quit the earth and completely regress from society. And the other side that says, no, we have to stop appealing to God and reject our humanity and become robots. And you're like, isn't there a synthesis here? Maybe we don't know what the all-powerful wants. Maybe we just have to deal with the stickiness of humanity and allow ourselves to develop over time by our experiences,
sort of muddle through. Like that's basically that's basically what Gullyfoyle does. And like Gullyfoyle is both the villain and the hero. And like that is like why I think that's the more philosophical, kind of almost theological actually, view of this book is that and Gullyfoyle is also all of us. Like we're all both the hero and the villain. Like we're all capable of like really depraved shit, and we're all capable of greatness. And
exactly.
And I think that's a very old, like mid-century view too. Like because I think that was informed heavily by the Second World War. because whether people sort of knew it consciously or not, they internalized that idea, right? That, if the shit that happened in Germany, a modern, European developed state, then clearly that could happen anywhere. So it's like,
of course.
So it's like this idea that, it's about human capacity and a realistic view of it rather than an idealistic view of it, which I think that's what makes Bester so great, I think.
100%. I think what you just said actually that's really heavy. I didn't even think about that with World War II, but it makes sense because even think about the heroes of World War II, the Russians. No, you think about the Americans and the Russians who went to go fight the great evil or whatever, like they were doing terrible things. You know what I mean? Soldiers in war do terrible things. They actually rape.
Russians
they rape and
raping
kill
all the women. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And you don't hear about the heroes are doing villainous things, and then you say, well, what led the Nazis didn't just wake up one day and decide that the Jews were bad. That's another aspect to that, where it's like I have my best friend is Jewish, and he told me that. He said, well, these guys didn't just wake up and just decide, like, we just don't like Jewish people. It doesn't work like that. There's conflicts here, and humanity is complicated and it's messy. And it doesn't justify evil, but it explains some of it. And having that understanding and that realistic view that, yes, even you right now, where you're standing in this podcast and me and you are talking, you have the capacity to create something very beautiful that changes the world, but you also have the capacity to kill somebody.
Yeah.
So do I, you know what I mean? Like, I never have, but I've been in the position to, when I was in the military, there was always an opportunity to, or when you're driving down the road, or when you've had too many drinks or something, you know what I mean? There's always a chance that we could do the wrong thing, but how often we do the right thing? Or how often do we push towards something greater, and how often are we complacent?
And
what drives us?
Yeah, and that's the thing that Bester does so well as well, I think, in terms of, and that's why I think Gullyfoyle is such a challenging character for a lot of people. Well, a lot of people who don't have, a lot of people with a very modern sensibility, which is usually very materialist, non-transcendent sort of like attitude towards life, an atheistic attitude towards life, basically. And I think he is challenging for them because they don't recognize the spiritual significance of Gullyfoyle, who starts out as an absolute like murderous cunt, but an idiot. And an idiot, like almost he's not savant, like but not smart. Like he becomes smarter as he goes, and but then also, bestows this gift upon humanity. But also, like, where was I going with that? The idea that it's a kind of, there's a spiritual dimension to this, and Gullyfoyle's challenging because he challenges us the idea in modern stuff. Whenever you see a complex character, right? Like a protagonist who might be an anti-hero or something like that, it's just like they do bad things. They're bad, but they're also kind of good. It's like this. It's like mix and match kind of thing in terms of distinct like actions they take, whereas Gullyfoyle like just encompasses it more in like a more holistic way. Like his capacity for evil is just as great as his capacity for good, because if he wanted to, he could like fuck up the world with this new ability that he gets,
Right.
Like,
and he also does it in a way, like you said, it's more holistic to where he'll do good and bad in one decision. It'll be good for one person and terrible for somebody else. And I think that that's something that's overlooked in a modern sense, that like a choice for one thing is also a choice against something else. And people don't recognize that now. They think you choose good or you choose bad. And well, it doesn't work like that. I can choose for something, but I am choosing against something else, whether I like it or not, or whether I'm aware of it or not. So to see everything in this sort of materialist way is, I think the thing that makes me mad about it though is that I do believe in the potential. I am a romantic in that way because I do believe in the potential of each person to do something great.
Yeah, same.
So I don't like the idea of myself or you or the people I like or the people I hate being limited by past actions or current actions. I really do believe in that trajectory. I believe that thing that we start someplace and we end up somewhere else. You know, not that we're just trapped in little concentric circles of behavior like roaches crawling around on the ground, you know, just like in the dark and with, you know, just terrified of a invisible boot about to stomp on us. And I think that it's such an ugly view of the world and of human beings, as if there's people do bad things and it's terrible, but like, give them time, you know. Give them time to grow into something. Like if you were born in shit, then maybe, you know, give it some light and a plant will grow. You know what I mean? Like allow something to happen here. Don't just be obsessed with the idea that it's shit and that it'll always be shit.
Don't take the black pill. Take the Bester pill.
Take the Bester pill. Take the potential of man pill. You know, I believe in the potential. Oh, that makes me mad. I just get so fired up thinking about that because I myself, I grew up very poor in a very bad part of town in Detroit. And then, you know, I've traveled the world and I've done so many things. Even at 37, I've accomplished more than a lot of people that I was born from. And I just did it because I had to do it. And I still feel like I have a lot of life to live. And what I will accomplish by the end will be very great. I don't like to think that I was just destined to be a schmo working at a pressing plant in Detroit, like at a canning factory or something like that. Like, you know, you were different in your life. There was something in you that made you different, that made you decide to write. There was something that sparked who you were. How could that not turn into something that sparks who you'll become and turns into something greater and inspires other people around you? I hate this idea of just everything being rote and mechanistic and, you know, useless. Like humans are useless. You're useless. Well, you are who you are now, and that's who you'll always be. Well, then fucking just shoot me in the face because there's no point for me to. I've done this already. I've already done this.
Because that's the sort of, that kind of attitude is the kind of false individualism of today, right? Like that.
Right.
I am, and it's like the whole idea. I really am like, do not want to talk about this stuff at any great length, but the idea of like identity politics, right? That like my lot in life, my inborn characteristics or whatever, that is what's individual about me. And it's like, well, no, you're talking about things that were bestowed upon you. What's individual about you is how you individualize yourself, like how you become yourself, like how you become who you're meant to be, as I think Carl Jung said that. And that is like, that's what matters. And that's why being an individual does matter. Like,
of course,
because you become who you're supposed to be. And that is not just about you. That is not just about your self-actualization. It is actually about the greater society too, because if everyone does that, then we're all in a better place, right?
Of course. And I mean, oh my God, of course. And I think it goes to show, like, if you look at people who were radicals of the past, whether it was an Oedipal thing, like think about somebody like Genesis Porridge or Andy Warhol or David Bowie, you know, people who just were. They weren't this idea, the false idea of like, yeah, the Oedipal stuff, where like, I'm an individual because of these in-group things that I start labeling myself.
I'm a disabled black, etc., 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 etc.
Exactly. And so you look at somebody, and I was telling somebody on Twitter this the other day, because they made a joke about transphobia, and I said, you know, if everybody acted like Genesis Porridge, there would be no transphobia.
Yeah.
Because, do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
There wouldn't be, because they were just doing them. You know, and it's like, I don't wake up in the morning and go, I'm a straight white male with a fucking, with this attitude, and these are my politics, because I don't even agree with that.
Mm.
Because tomorrow I might feel different, because some days I'm very liberal and some days I'm very mean and some days I'm very nice and some days I'm very Christian and some days I'm very sinful, allow me to be a person, and allow these people be unique by being unique.
Mm.
Be interesting because you're interesting. Quit trying to when you normalize something, you remove what makes it special. What are you doing here? You're trying to kill the human spirit by making everything into false individualism. It's so irritating.
Yeah.
It's so it's irritating, not because they're annoying and they're pedantic and they cry. It's irritating which they are, yeah. But it's irritating because they snuff out the potential for greatness in everybody.
In themselves as well.
In themselves as well.
Yeah.
You see somebody like Arca or even Sophie, and you go, hey, listen, I don't know what their attitude towards everything was, but I can appreciate that this is something that I have never encountered otherwise. I don't have to agree with it either. I don't have to now this is good. Everyone should be this way. No, nobody else should be this way. This is totally bizarre. That's why it's good.
Yeah, exactly.
Be a freak, like the Freak Show.
Be completely yourself. And perhaps you will transcend time and space one day like Gulliver Foyle.
Yeah, or you'll end up in the Freak Show.
Yeah.
Like that. That was one thing that was funny about the book, was when they went through the Freak Show after escaping the Chateau d'If.
That's such an amazing scene.
That was such an amazing, chaotic scene. The first half of the book, he does all these smash cuts, and he just goes from place to place to place to place, and then he tells the story, and it's in when he catches up in time. But the Freak Show I thought was so interesting because that and the Chateau d'If type prison that they were in, and the idea of some of the futuristic drugs really kind of showed like the paranoia around psychology emerging, the psychiatric emergence during the 50s, which is interesting because having that paranoia is sort of part of like the panopticon reactionary Cold War communist thing too, because now all of a sudden like the new science of psychiatry emerges, and there's these people who are doing bizarre things and they're keeping the freaks in a cage, and it's really a place for these hack doctors to come in and just do as they please and sell a ticket to see the Freak Show in the corner or whatever. I thought that was very interesting too, because it was never really addressed in other science fiction books that there was a concern that this might not be for the betterment of everybody.
Yeah, well, also because you can, and we don't need to go there, but just look at the past couple of years, people who are doctors and medical professionals and whatever have their own biases and stuff like that, and the threat there being that they can use this body of knowledge to in some way subjugate other people's individuality. So maybe that's there's something that he was kind of clocking there.
He was. I think he was. And I think it peaks up in a couple of little places. And that was definitely one of them where I was like, oh, because it's the doctor when he's getting his face tattooed and you go, or untattooed, and you go, this guy's, he's keeping this sort of harem of freak slaves that he puts on, and rich people come by and look at them. And I was like, oh, that's very strange.
That's very cyberpunk too,
to the max. Yeah. I think Neuromancer is I don't know. Have you read Radix?
No, I haven't read Radix. No.
So it's kind of a similar thing in which it's like a guttural creature goes on the journey of man, I guess. The story is the journey of man, but it's part of a tetrad. So there's a bigger piece to it, but it's about this one character, sort of his journey, his arc. And it has sort of a similar thing in there where there is the lowlifes and the freaks who are mutated in this one part, and the guy has started to become aware but isn't quite there yet, and it sort of shows his highbrow, lowbrow perspective on what's happening. He doesn't quite understand the exploitation of these people, but he knows that something's off now, whereas before they were just like freaks that were in his way.
Okay, sounds
And,
good. I might have to do that one.
It's a very good one. I would highly recommend. I think anybody who likes The Stars My Destination for that spiritual side, for that sort of, rising from shit into greatness. Radix has a similar thing, but it's also very like, it has like that real dystopian, dark future, dark possibility.
Yeah. The cyberpunk elements of The Stars My Destination are just so cool. Like when he gets all those augmentations, which like, you read that now, it's like, oh, that's like a pretty standard science fiction trope. But like back then it was actually pretty, integrating like servos and, machinery into the body was like not actually that big of a thing in the 50s. And like the idea that he like switches it on with his like molar, like presses his tongue to his
keypad in his teeth.
Yeah, that was cool. I like that. Like there's so much cool shit like that in this. Like it's got all of this, the spiritual themes and all that kind of crap, obviously that we've talked about, but there is so much just cool shit in this
Oh yeah.
well. It's like he just throws cool shit out there, like ideas and like devices and technologies,
planetary force field shields, and like, or like the novel beads or the memo beads. Like they have a bead that has an entire novel on it, or the drone technology that they use in the prison to like do slave labor.
Yeah, the little just like darts that like knock people out. Like, it's got so much cool pulpy shit in it. Like it's great.
And the weird drug. What was the drug? They only touch on it briefly, but he says the thing is just like the integration of the technology into the human body. He kind of really like broke ground with that. He also did with like the psych drug, where the man takes a drug and it lets him revert and become like an animal that he identifies with.
Oh yeah.
And there's a man slithering up and down, or it was called like animus or basis or something. And the man like becomes like a snake. So that was one of the first things that really reminded me of like Neuromancer, or like one of those other books, those cyberpunk books where it's like, what freak drugs, like the future, like what will people really are going to get into some freaky shit in the future.
Yeah. And he describes all that in a way that's very kind of interesting to read, rather than, because if you read older science fiction, it's all very, the energy matrix did this to that and blah blah blah.
Right.
Like whereas he's like, it's a lot more there's more style to it. Like, and that's why he's cool as well, because he does all of this cool shit with style. Like he doesn't need to explain the thrusters on the spaceship, or doesn't really go into really much detail about jaunting itself. It's more about the repercussions of jaunting and how that works in the society. And yeah, it's not like that kind of over-engineered nerd shit that you get a lot of the time in science fiction.
No, it's like Count of Monte Cristo meets James Bond in space.
Yeah.
And like, that's what's so cool about it, is you're like, he doesn't do a lot of exposition either, which is, I love. I hate, I never want someone to break it down for me. Like, just put me in the middle of it. And yeah, he's suave. Everything's suave. Like, there's a feeling, and that's what I liked about like that 50s thing. Like, you can tell he's writing, you can tell he hasn't escaped the style of his times, because there is that feeling of like, this is 50s London. This is 50s New York. This is, this area of time in which these people existed. And there's still references to people from the 1800s, like the old families 500 years later, and it's like, you have like a Hearst tycoon or a Howard Hughes type, but 500 years in the future. And what's like his imagination of what that has evolved into is still sort of, in a way, like the people of the great era, you know, like
Yeah.
And it's so I like all that stuff because I think that I think it's cool to do your best to think forward, but I think it must have been very fun for the people who were reading it at the time to be like, oh, they're talking about Broadway Electric or whatever, like he's still doing some referencing where you're kind of snapping your fingers and pointing at the screen, like
like Leo.
Yeah, exactly. We were like, oh, like, Ovaltine, like I drink Ovaltine, like he doesn't like he's not so above it all. Like that's why it's fun. He's still like, oh, it's pretty cool. This is what was popping at the time.
Yeah. The other thing I was thinking of, like I did some research on like the adaptation of this. And that was really interesting because it's basically another one of these books that has, the rights have sort of floated around for years. Lots of people have been keen to make it into a film, but just it's never happened. And my suspicion about why is because it was so influential on a lot of science fiction, a lot of the stuff in it, like it's unique when you read it because as a reading experience, it's unique. But if you were to put this into film, I just don't think it would hit the same way because so many of the ideas have been pilfered for other things.
Right.
So I think that's like the major problem with adapting it. Although I would fucking love to see someone adapt it. Like it would be really awesome.
That would be great. I feel like it would be fantastic. But yeah, it would probably come off like schlock because you're like, once again, like the Leo meme, you're recognizing like you don't know that you know where, you know what I mean? You don't know where it's from. So seeing where it comes from, you'd be like, oh, they did this and that, and they did this and that, and they did this and that. And you're like, well, yeah, but he did it first, asshole. Like,
yeah,
he was the first one. Nobody cares about it. I think only diehards care about that stuff, where you're like, but he was the first to do it and he did it best,
Yeah.
And I would love to see that. We were talking about that earlier on Instagram. I was like, even Michael Bay could do a big explosion film. I would even take that. I would even take like I would take a giant version of that film over some nerdy sort of A24 version of the film.
Yeah, that would be extremely bad. I also heard at one point that Paul W.S. Anderson was attached to it at one point, and that's the fucking guy who made the Resident Evil movies. And I'm like, no, thank you. Even that, I would not.
Thank God.
Want to say.
Thank God that didn't happen. Although he did good with Event Horizon, but it was kind of like
I do like that film actually. It's pretty.
That one's good. But... It is, but it's good because the concept. Yeah, the concept was cool,
and I love Sam Neill.
Right, and exactly. I was going to say, how can you not love Sam Neill? I mean, like In the Mouth of Madness.
Yeah,
Jurassic Park. He's fantastic.
He's great. All right. Did you have any more thoughts on Bester or The Stars My Destination? This has been really great. Thank you.
I really just enjoyed talking with you about this. And I would love to do any other book at any other time.
Let's do it.
I think that it's important for people to read great sci-fi, just as like my closing thought. I think it's important for people to read great sci-fi because science fiction was I don't know what it is now. I haven't read anything new, but it was a form of it was where romantic literature went to. People say like, well, nobody writes romance, I mean like the romantic style. I don't, but it went there. It went there. That's, it didn't disappear. It just, it became like a chameleon and it took on a new skin. And if you love frontier, the spirit of frontier, the spirit of potential and really just complicated characters who are passionate, but like you said, also fun, having a fun time because it's utility. right? Everything, like I said, art is utility. I will argue this point to death. But if it doesn't enhance your mood or lend to the way that you want to feel, then it's not art. And it's entertainment. And this is fun. It's so entertaining. I mean, like, it's just a blast to read. For all of the depth that there is, you could just read it on the surface and just have a great time doing it. You know, it's like a James Bond, or, you know, an action flick. But it's an action flick that does have layers, and it's meaningful, and it's not just about the hipsterism of knowing where to trace back the lines of what we see today, but it's about seeing what could be. And I think that's what great sci-fi does.
Completely agree. And yeah, like the idea that it is just a rollicking good time and adventure story, but has more there if you're looking for it. So yeah, that's a really beautiful way of putting it, Erik.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for joining me today.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I'll have a link to your album or whatever the hell you want me to put in there. And
sure. No, yeah, do it. Yeah. The name change is stupid, but we'll get past that together.
We will. We'll get past it together.
Yeah.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Be